This is the SmallmouthCrush podcast. If you're a hardcore angler, you've come to the right place. This is a weekly podcast that will interview some of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Travis and his guest will discuss what it takes to consistently catch big smallmouth, and you'll get a glimpse inside the mind of a trophy smallmouth angler. And now, here's your host of the SmallmouthCrush podcast, Travis Manson.
Hello, welcome to the SmallmouthCrush podcast. My name is Travis Manson. Another week talking smallmouth with the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America. Learning so much good information. And I'm always excited to talk to our next guest, our week's guest, because everybody has really opened up my eyes. I thought I knew a little bit about smallmouth fishing, but not after talking to these guys that are like the best of the best. Unbelievable stuff that we're learning. And I hope you guys are appreciating this podcast, as well as the viewers on my YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. So I want to thank you for tuning in for this week's episode. But before we go there, let's talk about the Reel Shot. Of course, Reel Shot's quickly becoming the top stop for bass anglers across the country. Name brands, all the good stuff. Jackal, Megabass, Lucky Craft. Of course, your staple brands, Berkley, VMC. They got Z-Man. They got a bunch of rods. Get your St. Croix rods over there at the Reel Shot. And guess what? You use my code SmallmouthCrush15. You're going to get 15% off your first order. You can't beat that. TheReelShot.com, and let them know Smallmouth Crush sent you. Simon, how are you tonight?
I'm good. How are you?
And I'm excited to talk with you because a lot of people I've spoken to on this podcast, I would always kind of pick their brains and be like, well, who else is a good stick that we need to talk to? And your name came up quite a bit. And so I'm excited to what you have to share when it comes to smallmouth. You know, your passion, it's one of the you're successful with it. You know how to put those big brown fish in the boat. And before we get into all this, I want to know a little bit more about you. And for the viewers at home, you know, a little bit of background on you, as well as kind of what your plans are and what your future plans are when it comes to fishing.
Well, I've been tournament fishing basically about, I think about 23, 24 years now. Yeah. Got into it in 98. And it's funny, I used to do a lot of salmon fishing, a lot of walleye fishing on the Great Lakes because, you know, I live in a great area. I got Lake Ontario, 5 minutes from the house, Lake Erie, 20 minutes from the house. So I'm just surrounded by big fish. So I did that. And then actually I went out to Lake Erie once fishing with a buddy, smallmouth fishing. That was it. I was done.
Really?
Got rid of everything else and just started chasing smallies all the time. Just a phenomenal body of water. We just live in a great area. And then started to expand. I mean, go out to Lake St. Clair quite a bit. Up in Ontario, we got a phenomenal lake, Simcoe. Got giant smallies on it. Not huge numbers, but big fish. You know, I mean, guys are catching 8-pounders in the summer.
Yeah.
Big fish. And then, you know, I mean, it's still about 3-4 hours from the house, but I got Thousand Islands not far. So just great fishing. I love chasing smallies. Love catching big ones all the time, but I mean, who doesn't? So the future, I mean, I used to fish a lot of tournaments. At one time, I was probably fishing about 25, 30 tournaments a year. Really scaled that back and probably doing maybe 3 or 4 right now. And of course, with what's going on in the world right now, I mean, I only did 1 or 2 last year, and we'll just kind of see how this year goes.
Sure.
I'd like to do about 3 or 4 this year, but we'll see.
Is it just the fact that you got busy, or is the passion still there? Do you want to ramp it back up in the future to 20, 25 events a year? Or
I don't know if I would do 2025 again. That's a lot. I would like to see myself doing between 5 and 10.
Sure.
I just got really busy with work. The passion's still there. I mean, we go out still, even if it's only half a day, 4 or 5 hours a day, we probably still go out 4 or 5 days a week. As much as we can.
Right.
So it's definitely the passion still there.
Good. So you have obviously some of the best fishing around, some of the best waters to fish. when you think of smallmouth bass and the big waters, the Great Lakes come to mind. Lake Erie, Lake Ontario, it's right in your backyard. With all these options, Simcoe, Thousand Islands, like where would you like ideally go? Like if you could be like, this is where I'm fishing.
If I could fish every single day, no question, it'd be Lake Erie.
Would it? Yeah.
No question. It's a factory. And you could do so many different things. You could fish them shallow one day, then go mid depth, and then go deeper and then out really deep. You can catch them as deep as 50, 60 feet, or you can go as shallow as 2.
Mm-hmm.
So you can fish them any way you want. Basically, you let the fish decide that, and seasonal patterns. But summertime, there's fish all over that lake. You
Yeah, there
just got to
truly
get 'em to
is.
bite. So
What would you say your favorite way to catch him would be?
um probably I've got 2 or 3 drop shot, of course,
Okay. Yeah.
tubes, swim baits. Swim baits on a football head, just a killer technique up here.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Bit of jerk baits. I don't really chase the shallow ones too often. I like to stay out a bit deeper because I find that the bigger ones are, especially in the summer, are deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm always looking for big fish.
You
But
mentioned 60 foot at times, and I
yeah,
know Lake Erie's known for that. It's interesting. I fish a lot of the Great Lakes as well, and it seems like every Great Lake kind of has a limit as far as the depth that you'll normally consistently catch them. And there's certain times of the year on Lake Erie when you have to be probing in that 50, 60 foot range at times. And it's just, there's something magical about it because it's a little bit away from the norm.
yes.
Unless you're familiar with fishing real deep like that, some people are intimidated by it. So, Simon, walk me through like the process of you. It's the right time of the year, say midsummer. These fish are going to be a little bit deeper than at least a few schools will be, and maybe you're just fishing for single fish. I'd love to pick your brain on that. What are you ideally looking for when you're looking at those deeper depths, and why are you going that deep?
Well, I find that when it's especially midsummer, surface temperature can be as high as 80 degrees. I find the bigger ones, especially, they're going to be eating smelt, stuff like that. So they're going to go deeper. The smelt go deeper. The big fish, the real big fish, go deeper.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a little tricky because a lot of times those fish are always moving. The schools of smelt are moving, but I do find that good population of really big fish, even though you'll find some suspended, they suspend over structure. So what I'm looking for, I'm always basically looking for transitions out there, whether it's sand rock, sand mud, rock mud, something like that. Even just small rock piles, right? Always looking for a change in structure. And what you'll find is even the fish that are suspending above that structure, chasing the smelt. And then you might fish them one day, let's say on a Monday, you'll go and you'll catch a bunch of big fish off it. You go back there Tuesday, there's nothing. They've moved to a different spot. You come back Wednesday, and there's another school there. There's always schools moving in. So basically, transitions, those sort of spots, I always like to address those as like the rest stop on the side of the highway.
Mm-hmm.
You pull in there, you get some food, you take off, go to the next one, you get some rest, that sort of thing. And they're always moving around like that. It's almost impossible to chase the big roaming schools. It's like chasing walleye because they just move around and off they go. But the other ones if you can find those deep transitions, they're going to hold fish. And even if they're suspended, they're still catchable. You just
Yeah.
kind of have to change up what you do. Whether spoons in the summer, unless you like catching a lot of sheephead, spoons in the summer, I don't really throw them. Once the temperature goes down to about 50 degrees. So let's say you've got fish, and I mean, we've had great success doing this. You're fishing 50 feet of water. The fish are holding 35 feet down. So they're 15 feet off the bottom, too deep for a crankbait. Run your drop shot at 15 feet. It doesn't matter. You're going to fish them vertically anyway, or do a technique that somebody just used a couple weeks ago.
Yep.
And I know it's got a couple different names.
Sure.
And the mopping,
Mm-hmm.
and just
Mm-hmm.
suspend that bait right above their head.
Have you always had, and maybe I don't want to speak for yourself, but do you have forward-facing sonar right now? Do you use that?
Not right now. I exclusively
Okay.
have Hummingbird on the boat. That should be released shortly,
Right.
hopefully. And
Mm-hmm.
for sure, definitely going to pick up one of those. I'm, running the Mega 360.
Yeah.
Phenomenal piece of equipment. I mean, I've always ran side imaging on the front of the boat. Actually, basically the year after it came out. So it came out in like 2005. And as soon as I got it, I put it on the nose of the boat too. Even though I couldn't get that clear picture, because you're looking for transitions, because you're looking for change in structure. It wouldn't show me a clear picture, but I could see basically out to the right side, there'd be a rock pile. Or even then you turn your trolling motor and I could look out to the front of the boat and see where the transition turns. But now with that Mega 360, no problem. I mean, it just shows up rock piles perfectly.
Yeah.
And it's really cool because we were doing this last year. So you would spot lock on a spot, keep your eye on the 360, and you could actually see the fish moving in and out off the rocks. And you just watch it, refresh. It's all of a sudden a fish should be there, so you just cast right at that fish. And
It
that
sounds
really
like,
helps in water.
yeah, it sounds like when you're looking for those deeper fish, you're looking for the transition zones that are holding them. So it's a lot of idle time, right? It's a lot of looking. I know you probably have a bunch of waypoints and spots, and you definitely want to check that. But if you're looking for new stuff, what do you recommend doing? Is it just seat time and idling?
Seat time, idling, and I tell you, I found some of my best spots running at about 60 miles an hour. One that we won about, like we won first year they had this tournament up here. We won the first event, came second in the second year, won the third year, all off a spot that we found doing 60 miles an hour.
Mm.
And it's just look for the change. And then when you see that change in bottom, so you're looking at the bottom. So big thing is sonar setup. You
Mm-hmm.
always want to keep your eyes on your sonar, even if you're just going in for the day, because you don't take the same track every day.
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking for just little changes. And you can see that if your sonar set up right. And I got really lucky. It's set up perfect
Yeah.
on the back of the boat. So I'm running, you have a very nice thin line. So soft bottom. Then all of a sudden, you just see it thicken up. GPS it, go back and check it. And I find a lot of stuff doing that.
Uh-huh.
I mean, idle time, you've got to do that. You got to just, like once you find a bunch of spots, you got to go back. You got to idle around. You got to side image the spots, try and figure out the spot on the spot.
Mm.
But I know what I think I'm most effective when we're running, and then slow down and go back and check it out.
Yes. Yes. I first got introduced to that technique years ago, and it looked so foreign to me. It was actually on Lake Erie, and there was an open going on, and I was so new. I was just, why are these people like driving 20, 25 miles an hour?
Mm-hmm.
Like, where are you going to go, dude? What are you doing? No, they were looking at their graphs, and it was like, I was so new. I was like, I couldn't it took me a while to put the pieces together, but that is certainly a technique that to locate that structure that really is effective, because you can cover so much more water instead of idling, looking for fish. Now you're just trying to find that secluded, isolated, because a lot of these spots, they're not on the map, right? It's not marked.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If it's on the map, it's a community hole. But the problem is electronics are so good these days. If it's close to a spot on the map, somebody's going to find it.
Mm-hmm.
So you got to just go keep finding different stuff. Even though those spots hold fish, I think you need to, and it's getting tougher and tougher all the time because electronics are getting so good, you need to find the isolated spots.
Yeah.
Even if you're only going to pull a couple fish off them, you pull a couple big fish off a small rock pile and you've got 10 of them. Well, now that could be 20 big fish. So you just got to keep moving around and GPS everything. I mean, I've got, you mentioned I might have a few spots. I got one graph that's full that holds 3,000 waypoints, and I've got another one that's half full. So
Wow.
it's got a crazy amount of waypoints.
Sure.
And I mean, they're not all good all the
Yep.
time. I wish they were.
Yeah.
It'd be very easy then.
Yeah, right.
Um,
So do you have a goal like every year? Do you like, I want to find X amount of new spots, or do you kind of, do you think of it like that? Or what
I'm always looking for something new.
do you, how
Oh,
often do you find like something totally different and amazing?
once or twice a year.
Yeah.
That's it. I mean, you'll find something, you're always finding something,
Okay.
but finding a really good spot, that's tough
Mm-hmm.
because it's got to have everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, on Lake Erie, uh, it's got to be, the natural current helps. Like it's so funny. The U.S. side and the Canadian side are so different.
Is it? Okay.
Same body of water, completely different.
Which side do you prefer?
Honest, most of the time, U.S. side.
You do. Okay.
Yeah, Canadian side can be really good, but majority of the time, the U.S. side holds bigger fish, and I think that has to do with current flow. Um, of course, the prominent winds are southwest up here, so the way it blows. But right now, we can't fish the U.S. side, so
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, with the borders being closed.
So the smelt is the bait of choice, I guess, for some of these deeper fish. Is that what
For
you're
the bigger
alluding
fish,
to?
yes, smelt, because the smelts are so fatty. I mean, gobies are always a big thing, but I find that the really big ones really go after the smelt all the time.
Nomadic, though. They roam.
They roam. Now, when the gobies first showed up, we had a stellar bunch of years because you literally could fish anywhere. It didn't matter. Those fish weren't leaving. There was just big fish around all the time. But it
Mhm.
seems like they're reverting back to roaming around chasing smelt.
Man, I
And I
agree.
think the smelt population exploded again.
Mhm.
So I mean,
Now
a lot of times you hear guys say, "Oh, we're going to go out and find some bait fish." I run away from bait fish.
you do.
There's certain times on the Eastern Basin around Buffalo, we've gone across schools of bait fish that are, 20, 30 feet thick and 5 miles long. I'm gone. I want to get out of that area.
Okay.
I'm sure there's fish there.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to hit my bait.
Too many
They're
options.
full. Yeah.
So the deeper transition zones with perhaps bait fish, but just not super stacked.
Yes.
Do you find a bunch of I know there's a good population of walleyes. Are you running into that situation when you're looking for smallmouth as well? Kind of a combination or
Quite often.
yeah.
Yeah, we catch a lot of walleye fishing for smallmouth.
What do you do in the situation when you pull up to an area, you're marking some fish, you start making some casts, whether it be drop shot, or whatever the case, and you find out that they're walleyes? Are you sticking around or are you out of there?
Um, it depends. Tournament wise, we'll give it a little bit because you get a lot of big fish mixing in with those walleyes.
Mhm.
Fun fishing wise, yeah, we're gonna catch a bunch of the walleyes, bring them home.
Right.
But we won't. If you're not catching any bass, just walleyes, and you're just gonna leave. But normally, if you're catching the walleyes that are close to the bottom, you get some big fish mixed in, big bass mixed in with
Good
them.
to know. Sure.
And then you know, drop shot's good, tubes are good, Ned rig is good. Just going a little heavier on the Ned rig. I mean, 3/8 up to half ounce.
And that's what you'll fish when you're probing those deeper depths.
Yes. Yeah.
What would be like your drop shot bait of choice when you're fishing that deep? Because, we mentioned, of course, there is gobies, but now we're dealing with some smelt. So is it a goby oriented bait that you're trying to mimic, or is it a smelt bait that you're trying to mimic?
Um, I think color plays more into it there. Like you've got a bunch of good baits out there that mimic small minnows, smelt. Basically, I think if you want to emulate a goby, you just lower the drop shot closer to the bottom. And sometimes that's all they want too. So you got to let them figure out, you tell you what they want. Higher up, I think it just change the color a bit, go more bait fish color. And then you're emulating the smelt and the bait fish, emerald shiners.
Yeah.
But it's interesting. I mean, we've seen it so many times out there where you have to run your drop shot about 3 inches from the bottom. But if you run a tube, they won't touch it. If it's directly on the bottom, they want nothing to do with it. But if it's just above the bottom, they'll eat it.
3 inches.
Yeah. You lose a ton of drop shot weights doing that.
Sure. What would you say the length of the leader to the hook, the longest that you use on a regular basis? How high would you go?
I'll let my electronics tell me.
Okay.
So really, and it's, so if I had to tie the night before, I'll do 18, 24 inches, but just to have it ready. But if we get out there and the fish are 3 feet up, then we'll just retie and go 3 feet. Like I said before, for a while, we were drop shotting them 15 feet. You're not casting that, but you're throwing it over the side of the boat.
Yep.
And that worked great. So basically, I'll just watch the electronics, watch my hummingbird, and they'll let me tell me how high to run it. And if they're belly to the bottom, then I'll just put the drop shot down, try a tube, try a Ned rig, something like that. And then if they don't hit those, go back to the drop shot, but lower it.
Right. No, of course, the tube's been around forever. Extremely effective way to catch smallmouth. There's so many different ways to work it. And talking to some of these anglers that really know how to catch smallmouth over the course of this year, they really prefer either kind of a drag and stop or a cracking of a tube. Really working that bait hard to get those reaction strikes. What do you find yourself doing more often than not with the tube?
Again, depends on the fish.
Does it?
Sometimes it's just a basic cast and drag, and other times just a hop. Cracking it in deep water, I don't find super effective. Not for myself anyway. Shallower fish really like that sometimes. But so if I'm going to pull up on a spot, I know the fish are there. I'll do a couple of casts, just straight drag. Then I'll try and swim it back, hop it back, and then give it, and sometimes just a quick shake. So you're slowly dragging it back and just quickly shake the rod tube. Not much. Just quickly shake the tip just a little bit, and it's just enough to get them going.
Man, fascinating. There's so much that goes into it. You did mention swim baits and football heads. Talk to me about that. Is that technique going to be for the deeper water, or are you kind of in that 20 to 40, or are you up shallow with that, or maybe a whole wide range of all of it?
I'll just change the weight of the head, and when we're out deep, anywhere basically over 30, 35 feet, 3/4 ounce. Go shallower, just lighten it up. And I probably wouldn't throw anything under a 1/4 ounce, probably 3/8, even in, 4 or 5 feet of water.
So are you dragging that just like you would a tube, or are you slow swimming it constantly?
Exactly the same way. I would, great last year was just drag it, lift, let it drop back down to the bottom, drag it, lift. And by the time, you go to do the next lift, you'd be on it.
Wow.
And just killer technique. And it's, guys have been doing that up here for, I think, since around mid 2000s. Remember when a friend of mine came to me about it, and we had to modify a mold just so it would work. And it worked. It worked really well. And he had it down to a science when he first started doing it.
Yeah. So those deeper fish, a 3/4 football, are you going to throw that on a bait cast or a spinning rod setup?
You could do either or, whatever you're comfortable with. A lot of guys just stay with the spinning. And then honestly, I'll let the fish tell me almost basically what to run. So I'll run the same pound line.
And what is
So
that? Are you a braid to fluoro, or are you straight fluoro?
I would run on those basically almost anything. I'm braid to fluoro,
Mm-hmm.
5 pound Power Pro
Yeah.
to a 6 to 12 pound leader,
Yep.
depends.
Yep.
And if the fish are more picking it, so you got to drop back to them and hit them, then I'll throw a spinning rod because I get a little, you got to give them a little bit more time. With a
Sure.
bait
Yeah.
caster, I find if they're just giving it the one smack, I get more hookups using a bait caster because you're always in that striking, and the
Uh-huh.
line's always tight on a bait caster.
Yeah.
You don't have to worry about picking the line up.
Yeah. Wow. Fascinating. I mean, there's so much that goes into it. Talk to me about that mid-depth, that 15 to 40. When you're out there, it's a lot of the same techniques, I assume. You're still looking for those transitions, whether it be
Yep.
rock to sand, rock to mud. Do you find that those fish are a little more pressured in that zone, or can you find some isolated areas still to this day that are a little bit out of the way if you concentrate
Um,
in the standard depth, that most guys, when they think of smallmouth and deeper water, 20 to 40 is kind of, that's my comfort zone.
if as long as you stay off the beaten path, basically, it's a great big body of water. There's lots of structure out there, so you can still find some that aren't pressured. But I mean that 15 to 20 foot range is great too because now that opens up crankbaits and everything else.
So do you throw a lot of crankbaits?
I throw quite a few.
Wow.
When they're suspended a little bit, or I know they're
Uh-huh.
feeding on bait quite a bit. Um, Early season is really good for that until about mid June on the U.S. side, and because it's really weird on the U.S. side they spawn earlier than the Canadian side. Whether that's the way the water temperature is pushed over or
Mm-hmm.
sunlight, I really have no explanation for it though, because a lot of the fish on the U.S. side they're done by mid June,
Mm-hmm.
and Canada we still see them in beds in July.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I mean, crankbait is just killer, especially when those big females like to come off the beds and they go and suspend over 20, 30 feet of water. Crankbait's amazing for getting those fish to bite.
What are you looking for in an area to throw a crankbait? I mean, is it the same deal? Like transition? Are you marking them on the graph and then that's what why do you choose that over, say, getting over these fish and watch them on the graph and dropping down with a drop shot or throwing a tube? What
Well,
makes you decide to throw a crankbait?
in right after the big females spawn, they'll go and they'll suspend over 20, 30 feet of water. They might be 5, 6 feet off the bottom,
Mm-hmm.
and they're loners, and they're just kind of hovering. So you watch your graph, and they'll do the same thing. They'll go suspend around transitions, anything like that, and basically just cover a lot of water with it,
Mm-hmm.
with a crankbait. And I mean, it's again, you got to watch. You watch your graph, so you throw in your crankbait, and then you can actually see the fish chase your crankbait in. You bring it up, they don't bite. Just drop a tube down.
Right.
Get
Yeah.
their attention. You catch a lot of fish doing that. So I mean, it's a great search technique, and you can do really well off it. I mean, you cover a lot of water, and you get those big females to come in on it.
Uh-huh.
And
Top.
those are fish that, like a lot of people, are just convinced they're walleye, so they don't even bother fishing for them.
Sure. I can see that. So top two crankbaits that you're going to have tied on.
Top two. I would say basically, the standby is the DT16.
Okay. Yeah.
Kind of tough to go going down 16 feet.
Yeah.
And a Norman's DD22.
Yeah.
If I had to pick two, that'd be two.
That's awesome, man. And obviously those have watched the every guest. We hear a lot about crankbaits and DT 14, 16s,
Yeah.
DT 20s, DD 22. There's a couple old school guys Frank Scalish was a big fan of the DD22, of course. I'm just curious, like, what is it about that bait, the DD22? I mean, it's been around forever.
Yep.
It there's nothing fancy about it. They're still pretty, reasonably priced compared to some of the other crankbaits out there.
And I do real well. I think it's got a nice wobble to it. It's just a good bait, and they haven't tried anything fancy with it.
Sure.
So they had something that worked, 30 years ago. Why change it? Just keep it the same, change a couple colors here and there. I love those baits.
Yeah.
And one bait, a shallow bait that still slams them all the time, is Big O. Bait still works.
Yeah. Dang.
And I mean, there's nothing wrong with some of the others. I mean, some of the Jackal stuff and the Mega Bass stuff, you go spend $30-$40 on a crankbait, but if the fish don't bite it.
Yeah. Yeah. Bait fish colors for those crankbaits? Are you getting a little crazy at all on colors, or pretty standard?
I tried going crazy on the colors, and just basic bait fish colors.
Right.
Yeah. And then the other one, white chartreuse.
Got to have a little chartreuse.
A few other lakes that's basically just the color to have in the boat, and that's it.
Man.
So, especially when the water's a little dirty.
I'm curious to know, as far as your rod setup for those DT16s, DD22s, low gear ratio reel. I'm assuming. I don't want to speak for yourself, but sometimes it's hard to reel that DT22 in all day long, right?
It can wear you out, that's for sure. 6-1.
Okay, yeah.
Throw it on a 7-11 rod. Nice long casts, and as long as the it's balanced, you're pretty good.
Yeah, yeah. As far as tournaments and your success in the past, out there, is it something that what do you think makes you so successful? Like, is it just experience, or is it the fact that you're able to really dial things in on that given day? Spots. I mean, what makes you so good?
If I had to credit a lot of it, I'd have to say electronics.
Electronics, sure. Yeah.
Like I know a lot of people are saying now, it's turning into a video game fishing. Been doing that since the beginning. I can't see what's going on in 40 feet. So your eyes never leave your graph, ever. So you have to know what you're fishing, and you have to know the structure around you. And I think just knowing where a lot of big fish like to be, because I mean, you can have great spots, and I know this is largemouth, smallmouth, doesn't matter. You can have spots that hold fish, but then you can have big fish spots. Then normally, if you catch fish there, he's going to be big. Well, on the Great Lakes, you can have like big fish spots, but there's lots of big fish there. It just holds big fish. And it all has, the same sort of stuff. You just have to find it. And that's where knowing what you're fishing all the time and what's around you underneath the boat all the time. And that's why you see a lot of these guys, big water fishermen, their head is always down. Always. Like, you could literally idle up to somebody.
Sure.
He has no clue you're there.
Yep.
He doesn't even know you've pulled up next to him, because his eyes do not come off that graph. I've had a few tournaments where I talked to my buddy, and he goes, "How'd you do on that spot?" I was, "Oh, pretty good." Because we were just next to you.
Didn't even know.
Didn't notice you. And then I ask another friend, and he'd be like, "I didn't see anybody." Because your eyes are stuck on the graph.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think just knowing what you're fishing, because I don't think a lot of people understand exactly, like, I've got this good spot out there. Well, what is it? Yeah. Well, it's a good spot. Okay, why is it a good spot? Does it have rock? Does it have gravel? Is there deep water close to it? Is there mud close to it? Is there sand? Is it like a transition, a long transition? And They don't quite understand it. So when that spot no longer pans out, because I think a lot of these fish move because they're not stupid. You catch a bunch of their buddies, it breaks up the school. And you do that over a period of time, and they just stop going back to that spot. Because you say, guys, smallmouth guys, oh, my spot dried up. There's no reason for it to dry up, except the fish don't go there anymore. And that's why you can run to a spot 5 years later and it's loaded again.
Exactly.
You got all new fish on there.
I know. I'm so hoping that some of my spots start showing up with fish again, because it's been dry for a while in a lot of these areas. That leads me to my next question. When you're fishing a tournament and you have things dialed in and you got fish located and you go to the area, and I'm sure this has happened hundreds of times to you, you go there and the fish are gone.
Yep.
Are you in panic mode? Let's
No.
say it's 10 o'clock and you don't have a fish. How do you keep cool? Like, what is your confidence to know that, hey, I've been here before, I'm going to get this job done somewhere? But what goes through your mind? Like, how are you trying to get through your day when your areas that you really thought the night before in your head was going to be the deal?
Oh, I've seen it so many times.
Right.
I think we all have.
Yeah.
And some of those spots are the furthest away.
Yeah.
So you just basically just try and have, I know it's difficult sometimes, but try and have 2-3 spots. But if you're marking fish, there's a difference, especially here in the fall. And I know this goes on all over the place, and the fish just won't bite. Like, you're sitting on 10,000 fish, but you cannot get one to bite. Then you just have to wait it out.
Wait it out. Okay.
Yeah, just back off them because they're there.
Do you see them having little windows at all out there when they will turn on?
Yeah, but the problem is, I think a lot of times, especially in September, October, some of my best, like, big fish have come, but after 5 o'clock, as the sun starts to settle. So I think they start to feed at night.
Later on in the year. Okay.
They sense the change. There's something changing. The current's changed. Something like that has changed, and it just happens every year. And it starts basically in September, and it goes on for about 6 weeks, and it is frustrating.
Right.
Because you're just sitting there looking at these fish, and you're like,
yep.
And you're like, nope, they're not bass. No, not this time. You drop your camera down. Yep, they're bass. And there's lots, and they won't bite.
Yeah, you brought up a good point. I recommend anyone that's going to fish big water, clear water, where you can get a good visual. Of course, the underwater camera comes into play. Some people may not be as familiar of what different species look like on their graph. I've been fooled before. I always say, before you start changing baits and colors, go check out what those fish actually are, because you'd be surprised. Might have some sheephead, might have some walleye, or you might have that crazy big ass school of smallmouth that just, I know exactly what you mean. Thousands of them, and they don't want to do nothing.
Nope. And then once they turn on that small window, it's just insane. It goes ballistic, and then it shuts off. But I find it normally later in the day for whatever reason.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then that time, I would say, if I had to, all the tournaments I fished in, let's say September, October, most of my big fish have come after 12 o'clock. Jeez, as the day progresses.
That says something. Yeah.
It drive you nuts in the morning.
Right.
Oh, geez, you're just sitting on all these fish. It's okay. They just won't bite. And then you're just going through different baits, just trying to trigger one or two.
What's your most memorable tournament, either win or just a high finish, just kind of sticks out?
Most memorable would probably be, well, the first bass tournament we ever fished. I fished it with a friend of mine, Ernie. And it's like we couldn't do any wrong. And it was a 2-day event, and we ended up winning that. And the very first thing he said to me, he says, this doesn't happen all the time, because we couldn't do anything wrong. We fished Lake Erie, and then we went down to the Lower Niagara, Lake Ontario. And nobody fished bass at that time on Lake Ontario, on our end anyway. This is going back in 98. And I was like, we just kind of moved around a little bit, and then we just caught the heck out of them. And I mean, but most memorable win, man, there's been so many.
Mm.
There's so many. Just first big event I won was 2000. I won the Canadian Open up here, and I won that out of a 16-foot aluminum
Wow.
killer boat because that's all I had.
Uh-huh.
So that was fantastic. And then the last one we won was a couple of years ago, the Canadian Tire Open up here, and that was great. We just got onto some nice fish and
Everything went right.
It went right because we just waited them out, and every bite we got was big. We didn't catch a lot of fish, and it was just a lot of fun.
Dang. What's your biggest personal best smallmouth?
7.5.
Nice. That's a serious fish there. Where'd you catch that out of? What lake?
Lake Erie.
Lake Erie.
Yeah. I've got 3 of them at 7.5.
Man.
Trying to get a 7.51 would be nice.
Uh-huh.
No, it's just exact every time. So I'm not complaining. I mean, they're beautiful fish.
So were those deeper fish or shallow, or walk me through how'd you catch them?
Those tube fish transition late October, early November.
Okay. Yeah.
And 2 of them came off the exact same spot, years apart. Just a big fish spot. It's just one of those spots where you go and say, okay, we're not going to get many, but if we go here, we can catch some big ones, and you do.
And throughout the years, do you have a handful of those areas where it's proven you've been there so many times, and you kind of know that this particular area is a big fish spot? Do you ever see it change where, man, there's a bunch of fish here this day, and then the next day it's just a couple decent size, like good fish, or is it kind of consistent to what we were talking about earlier, where it's just 1 or 2 good ones?
It's fairly consistent.
Is it?
I've seen it change over the years where, for a couple of years, it's a really good big fish spot, like giant fish. And then you'd get decent fish off it for a few years. Then it'd go back to giant fish again. You normally know if you hook one there, it's not going to be small. So the spots can be fairly consistent.
Do you find yourself
anyway?
Do you find yourself getting away from the crowds during a tournament? Are you one of those guys that likes to won't think twice of making a run where you barely have enough fuel to get back?
No problem there at all.
You like
if
it?
I got to run, we'll run.
You love it, yeah.
Yeah, and it's terrible, but I mean that's even just for fun fishing too. If we're gonna fun fish, I'll try and of course
launch closer.
Yep. But if I can't, then we're gonna run. And I don't like fishing crowds. I really don't. I just think that everybody gets a couple good fish, and it just shuts everything off.
Man, that's a good. I mean, really, the whole moral of this podcast, I think, is being more intimate with your electronics, knowing what you're looking at down there, getting comfortable with noticing transition and what that actually means, hard bottom to soft. I get, just like you were saying, little rest stops along the way, places for these fish to kind of feed and then continue on, because more and more often I'm finding that if I want to stay on top of fish on the Great Lakes and competitive, I got to keep looking. I got to keep moving. And I can't get comfortable with spots where I know you've won a ton of tournaments, but how often are you winning off of the same locations the next year? Or does that still happen?
That last one we spoke about, where we did the won the first, won second, the year after won the third. That's the last time. Normally you don't win. Basically.
Isn't that crazy?
And whether it's because of timing, whether it's because the fish move, or whether it's become a popular spot. That happens a lot.
It does, yes.
A friend of mine, he basically says when you fish a tournament, and you win off a spot, you basically sold your spot.
You're done.
Is what you've done.
I agree. It's
You know?
crazy. I look back on whether it be tournaments or just awesome days out there, and you might have a good summer on a certain area, and then the next summer it's like dead. It's like
Yes.
gone.
Yeah.
Not happening.
No,
And
they
you
just
still go
shut off
back every time because you remember.
because you're convinced I can get those. I just missed them. They're not there.
Yeah.
Even if it's just if you run over it. I constantly do that.
Mm-hmm.
Run and stop, and it's like, no, they're still not here, and I just take off and find something else. And it's like, well, why aren't they here? And it doesn't make any sense. But something's changed. Whether that, again, we talked about it before, that school of fish that you were hitting just said, no, I'm not going there anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Because I know if I went to a certain gas station every day and somebody knocked me on the head, I'd stop.
Right.
I'd
You
stop
would.
going to that gas station.
True story. Yes. Yes. If I had to give you one bait to use for the rest of the year for smallmouth, and that's all you can throw, you're allowed one bait to go have as much fun as you want with it. What bait are you going to be choosing?
Could I throw it any way I want?
Any way you want.
Give me about a 3 to 3.5 inch swim bait.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I can throw that any way I want. I can drag it on the bottom. I can swim it. I can twitch it. I can put it on a drop shot. I can do whatever I want with that swim bait. Yeah.
Good choice. Now we're going to go one step further. Color.
One color?
One color.
I would basically say like a green and white smallmouth magic.
Smallmouth magic. Yep.
Great color no matter where you go. I mean, green pumpkin's always good, but no, I'd have to say smallmouth magic.
All right. That says a lot, man. I know with the success you had, I would suggest people go pick up some smallmouth magic colored swim baits.
That green and white, it's a great combination.
Yeah.
Because I mean, when you're swimming it or you're hopping it, the fish see the flash of the white on the belly, the green on the back. So it could be a bait fish feeding. It could be a light goby swimming along. It depends again. If you drag it on the bottom, just all they see is the green back swimming. They don't see the white. Because I mean, we tell people talk about goby colors. What goby colors? They change color several times. Depends on the depth. Depends on the clarity of the water. Depends on whether they're spawning or not. Some people, the black gobies. Yeah, the male gobies when they're spawning, they turn black and they're super aggressive. Gobies change colors all the time.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's one color. But if I had to do that one, it'd be that one.
Gotcha. Man, that's good. That's good stuff. Listen, Simon, we're running out of time. This was fascinating. I know you truly are one of the top smallmouth bass anglers in North America, so I really appreciate you coming on the show, talking about a little bit of techniques, and really fascinated about that deep water. That's an area I feel comfortable with. I just don't spend as much time in that deeper stuff. So thanks to you, I'm going to take a little deeper look, if you will, next time I'm out there and see if I can find some of these fish. If people want to follow you at all, do you have any presence on social media, or how can they keep up with what you're doing? And if you want to talk about that a little bit.
Facebook, Instagram. I honestly don't post as much as I should, but I'm going to do a little bit more. But
sure.
Just Facebook is just Simon Frost, and then Instagram is, I believe that's Simon Frost Iceman.
Iceman. What's
the name behind that? Gave me that nickname years and years ago. He used to actually MC tournaments up here. He's now emceeing tournaments down in your area. And he's doing the elites. Mercer gave me that nickname years ago.
Mercer, really?
Yeah.
Iceman.
Yeah, and he's the one that actually, with the saying, "You sold your spot." That's him.
So true. So true. We're actually going to have Dave on to wrap up the whole podcast.
Oh, nice.
At the end of the year to kind of, I figured, of course, he's a great smallmouth angler, but he's around some of these top guys all the time. And I think hearing a perspective from him, what he sees different in these guys that can consistently go out and stay focused in some of the worst harsh fishing conditions imaginable.
Yeah, and they do well under those conditions.
All the time. So that'll be a fascinating podcast as well. But that'll wrap up season 1 for us here at the Smallmouth Crush podcast. Again, Simon, thanks for joining us. Certainly appreciate it. Best of luck in the future. And I want to thank our viewers and listeners today. And we'll definitely have another great podcast next week for everybody. So thank you, Simon.
Thank you.
Awesome. And as always, until next time, we'll see you guys on the water.
Thanks so much for listening today. Make sure that you're subscribed to the show and follow us on Instagram at SmallmouthCrush. Also, the YouTube channel, SmallmouthCrush. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a 5-star rating and comment with a review below. And as always, until next time, we'll see you on the water.